Hello everyone, this is Steven again, and in this video I wanted to show you how you could take this character animated walk and translate it forward. So for a walk cycle, generally you're not going to have it walking in place unless you're making walk cycles or run cycles for a game or needing to move it in a different way. So usually start with a walk cycle to get the positions right and get it walking in place. And there's a variety of things and lots of different ways that people will move the character forward. And one of the most obvious is just taking the placement controller and moving it forward and trying to line that up. But the problem with this method, it's sort of like when you play a game that has a character controller and the feet are just walking in place and the character controller just moves the body forward and the feet aren't looking like they're actually placed on the ground, they're sliding around or something, right? And so we could set this up. I can kind of have this go to a certain length, and I'm going to do this. I'll set this to 200. And you don't have to follow along. This is just an example of what I could do to do this. And then you just take that placement controller and then, you move it forward. Or we're going to go to, because this is a 25 frame walk cycle, I could then, move it forward and then key it, right? And then try to figure out where the feet are being placed or something, right? So I can kind of do that. But it's typically not the way it's done. This placement controller or this world controller that's on the bottom is usually only used to initially place the character, or if the character is in a vehicle, to kind of attach it to the vehicle and have the character go along in that way. So, or if the character is flipping, I've seen some people use this placement node to have the character flip or something. But generally, you don't want to do that to walk the character forward, because of the same issue that you're going to have the feet sliding. So, but there is a technique that we can use. So I'm going to undo this and I'm going to keep this at 200. I'm going to take the range down to 25. So that way my whole animation is going to be 200, but the range I'm looking at is 25. So when I look at some of these key positions, right, and I select the controls that have 25 frames, because it's a 25 frame walk cycle, we're going to kind of work with that. So one of the big things that I'm going to do here so that I can work with this a little bit easier, first off, is I'm going to switch to a side view, right? And I already have this sort of set up to kind of show this, right? And so when I walk forward, when the character walks, and it moved because I had it cycling forward, when the character walks, he's starting in place. So the very first thing that I need to do is, first I need to make sure that frame 1 and frame 25 are identical. They cannot be any different. If they don't, this is not going to work. The same thing with frame 13. If there's any kind of variation, what I want to do is I want to make sure that frame 13 is sort of an exact opposite of frame 1, the different feet. So what I could do is I can select this controller, and I'm going to go over to the channel box. And if I want, I can do this from the perspective view as well. Oop. Didn't mean to do that. So I can kind of select the controllers a little bit easier, right? So on frame 1, I'm going to look at the translate Z. The other thing that I want to make sure of is when the foot is planted on the ground, this is really essential for this too, the controller must be flat. There should not be any rotation or any translate Y or any translate X if X is to the side of the character. So the character is moving front and back, so that's the translate Z. So I'm going to copy that value, and then I'm going to go to frame 13, and I'm going to select this controller. And you can see that that value is pretty much the same. So I'm going to paste that in there, but I want to take out the negative value because it's opposite, at least for this character. Some characters are not set up that way, but the way this one is set up is there's a negative, one has a negative value and one has a positive value. And this is something to remember as I go through this, is if your character doesn't have a negative and positive value on the different 2 feet, and they're both positive values moving in that direction, then you're not going to be using a negative or a positive, right? It's just one positive direction, right? So, but this particular character is set up where one control has a negative value and one has a positive value, right? So I want to make sure that's keyed. So I can actually just select Translate Z and press S on the keyboard, and that'll be keyed. And that's as long as you have the preferences set up like I had set it up in the original animated walk cycle that I kind of walked through before. So I'm going to go back to frame 1. And so I copied that value. Now I'm going to go to this one, and you're going to see that there's multiple values there. But what I'm going to do is sort of one at a time. Translate Y is 0.134. So I'm going to go to 13. and I'm going to go to this control, and I'm going to pop that in there. And again, I'm going to give that a negative value because this is the one on the negative. And I can key that right now. The translate Z, I'm going to go back, select this control, go and copy that translate Z, go to 13, select the other control. I know this is a lot of back and forth. And then since that was a positive value, I want to make sure this is a negative value, right? And then I'm going to key that. And I'm going to go back to the other one, select the control, go to the rotate X. And when I was talking about the controls being flat on the ground, I did only mean the ones that are moving along the ground. That's the most important. When it's up in the air like that, it's going to rotate and you're going to get that. But it's only when it's on the ground, right? So now I'm going to go to 13 and I'm going to select the other control. And then I'm going to paste that in and then key that. And so now when I pop back and forth, and let me go to the side view again. When I pop back and forth, it's going to look like they don't even move, right? So I've got them sort of in these exact positions. And if I compare that to frame 25, they're in the exact positions. Now the arms are a little bit different, and that's okay. We might be doing something different with the arm swing and making a little offset, but you can see that the foot positions are all the same, right? This is very crucial to making this translate forward because the spacing between the feet needs to be the same. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to figure out the distance between the heel of this foot and the heel of this foot, or the toe, but it's easy because this heel is on the ground and then this heel is up. So we're going to have to kind of think about where this would land if it kind of curved down. So this foot would curve down, right? And I could take that and I could just grab that one controller, select that, and take out that just temporarily, right? I can just set it to 0 and not key it. But the problem with that is that the controller is on the ground, but because it's sort of pulled, it's pulling like, the body's pulling the foot forward. So it would have to start doing things like dropping this down, but not keying it just to make sure the heel is on the ground. Now I could do that. We can try it and see how that works, right? What I need to do is figure out that distance. So the best way to do this is to go up to create, and I'm going to go to the measure tools, and I'm going to go to the distance tool. Now the distance tool allows me to put a little controller or a little locator here and here. So you're going to see it has this little crosshair. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the X key, and what that's going to do is it's going to snap it to the grid. So I'm going to click right there. And then it still has a crosshair and it's asking me to click again. If I hold down X, it's going to click, but it's going to snap it to the grid on the base and then one of these. So if I click there, it's going to move it here. But that's okay because I can move it. So I'm going to press Q on the keyboard. I'm going to select that locator that's in the back. I'm going to press W on the keyboard so I can move it. And I'm just going to slide it forward. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Dolly in really is what the term would be, to get this sort of really lined up right where the heel is. I'm going to move this over here, select this one, and move this back. Sort of right where that would pivot from, right? It doesn't have to be exact, but pretty close, right? And now we'll see that this distance tool says 4.411967. Whatever the distance is that you've created, it's going to be consistent amongst all the other walks, right? All the other positions. So now I've lined this up with the back of this heel and where the back of this heel would be. And if I want to adjust that a little bit, I can. It's not a big deal where that lands as long as it's really close, right? So now I can select this distance tool. I'm going to go over to the attribute editor, and it's important you go to the attribute editor and not select the distance dimension, the transform, but the distance dimension shape. And in here, there's a distance value, and I can just select that and copy it, right? And now if I move this, since I didn't key the foot in this position or the body down, right, it's just going to kind of pull back up. But now I've got that distance where it needs to be. At this point, I don't need the distance tool anymore, but I'm going to leave it right there just to kind of get a gauge, right? Now I'm going to dolly out a little bit. Now I'm going to do something that kind of set up my display, which I've kind of showed you really quickly, but it allows you to see the character from a couple different views, right? And that's if you go to panels and you go to layouts, I'm going to go to 3 panes split top. And what that's going to do when I select that is it's going to put 3 different views. Now, you're probably not going to have one that shows the graph editor down here, but all I have to do is go to panels, right? Yours might have something like the perspective view or something, right? But you can go to panels and go down to Panel, and then go to Graph Editor. Now, if this is grayed out, it means the Graph Editor is open in a separate window. So you need to close that so that you can open it here, right? So if you have the Graph Editor open a separate window, it'll just be grayed out. So close it, and then you can select that, right? And now I can choose from here. I have chosen this to be an orthographic from the side view. And what that allows me to do is see exactly the placement of the feet, as well as the root or the center of gravity control, right? That's usually around the waist, although there's a different hip control, right? So that's the one I'm concerned about. And I'm also going to be concerned about the feet and these what are called pull vector controls for the knees. And that's the direction the knees will go. So these are all the ones that I'm going to be concerned about. I don't need to see anything else above that, right? So I'm going to get that in view. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to translate this root or this center of gravity control forward this same distance. The same distance as the distance tool. So that's why I selected that and copied the value, right? I'm going to go back to the channel box so I can kind of close that down because I don't need that anymore. I just needed the value. So I'm going to go to this center of gravity control, select the Translate Z because it's moving in the Translate Z. You can see right here, those coordinates say the Z, which is forward and back, and it's forward and back for the character. Now, I have a couple curves here, which means I have the character sort of moving back and forth as he walks through, right? So the center of gravity is moving back and forth a little bit as he does this cycle, right? And I don't really want to destroy that. But I'm going to go to frame 13. I'm going to select that keyframe. I'm going to come up here where the value is. So these stats, this is the frame number, and this is the value. Right now, it's currently set at 0. Now, what I can do is just paste in the value from the distance, right? What I copied and I pasted in there and hit return. Now, it's going to move this entire character forward, and it's going to look like it's breaking. That's okay. Don't worry about it so much. Now, I'm going to go to 25. I'm going to select that keyframe. I'm going to paste in that same value and hit enter. But the problem here is 13 is the distance between the contact position to the contact position. That's why we did this distance. I wanted to know we're dealing with the contact position on frame 1, the opposite contact position on frame 13, and the last one at frame 25. And this distance between those 2 feet on the contact position is exactly the momentum that the character is going to be moving forward from 1 to 13. So I need to double that for frame 25. Now, I could just use a calculator and calculate that out, but there's a really neat trick in Maya in the graph editor that you can use. And that's if you hold down Shift and press plus, or wherever your plus key, if you have a specific plus key, you can press that, and then an equal sign, and then paste in the value. And now I'm going to hit return, and you're going to see, I'm going to select here and press A on the keyboard. You're going to see that this one went to that value, 4.394, and this one doubled that value because I did a plus equals, which added it to the current value. The only problem with this is I have these keys in between, and I'm going to deal with those in a little bit. But if I look at this, when I go to 1 to 13 to 25, the full controller is moving forward, right? So I'm just going to deal with these contact positions first. Now what I need to do, I'm just going to kind of go down. I'm going to deal with these pull vector controls next, right? And then so I've selected both of them at the same time. I can go to the Translate Z here, and I can go to the Translate Z here, right? I'm just going to hold down, I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to hold down Command, but you can hold down Control if you're on a PC. And it's going to select both of them, the Translate Zs, right? If I hit F here, I'm going to have to key them, right? So I'm going to go all the way to frame 25, and I'm going to just press S on the keyboard, and it's going to key those values. So then all I have to do is go in here and paste. It's going to set that value at that. Oh, let me back up. Let me press A on the keyboard so I can see these keyframes. And since these are the only 2 channels I've selected, the Translate Z, because it's just moving forward, I'm just going to select that key, then paste in that value, and it's going to put that value in there. Then I'm going to, again, plus equals, paste in that value, enter, and it's doubled the value, right? So now I can press F, and it's there. So one thing that I'm going to bring up later is why I see these lines right here, and I'm going to talk about turning on the infinity so it keeps going. But I want to take these two keyframes, and I don't need to necessarily select them as long as I have the channels selected. And I want to make them linear. I don't want any slow in and slow out or tangent handles on the movement forward of those particular elements, those controls, the pole vector controls, right? I'm also going to go back to the root control or center of gravity control, and I can kind of see where this is happening. And at some point in time, I'm going to add a little bit of movement here so that it's actually moving these up and down. And I just want to bring that up because I haven't dealt with that. All I'm doing is talking about 25, 13, and 1. So for the pole vectors, I'm just causing them to go linear. I just want them to go linear from the start, from the first frame to frame 25, right? Now I'm going to select one of these controls, and if I have any problems selecting those controls, I can kind of select them down here, which is why I set up this kind of a view. So I'm going to select that control, select the Translate Z. Now the important thing here is I need to figure out when the foot is on the ground. So the one that's in the back is about to come up. So on frame 1, right, it's not going to be on the ground until it reaches frame 13, right? And the reason I bring this up is I don't need these keyframes right here, right? I'm going to just take those out because this is going to be on this foot where the foot is on the ground. And I'm going to select across these two keyframes, right? It's only when this foot is on the ground. I want it to stay in place. I don't want it to move. So I don't want any keyframes, but I also want it to be linear. I want it to go just straight from here to here, right? But I'm going to go to this value, and then I'm going to copy that over, right? I've selected that keyframe, select it across there, and I'm going to, again, since this is a minus, I want to continue to add a negative value. So I'm going to press the negative key equals and paste in that value. And this is going to minus the previous value, right? So that's going to go down. Now I'm going to go back to frame 1. Right? Now that was this control. So now I'm going to go to this control, right? Go to the Translate Z. And since the other one was at the end of the curve where it was going to go flat, this one is about to go flat, right? So this foot is about to be placed on the ground and not move. So I don't want it to have any variation. So I'm going to take out those keys. I'm going to select these two keyframes and make them linear. Again, as a kind of a reminder here, when I scrub back and forth, you're going to see the foot move because it's a linear movement, right? But what's happening is once it's placed on the ground, once it's here, we're going to be setting it up so that it will not slide, right? And it's going to be kind of sticking in place, which is why it's going to be a linear movement, right? So I'm going to go to frame 25. And now I'm going to select that last key. So I've just realized that the other one actually should be moving forward. But I'm going to keep dealing with this one really quick. Go to the Translate Z. This one should be the negative, right? It does say a negative there, but I'm going to go negative equals, paste in the value, and go here. I need to go back to this one, fix what I broke here, because I put it in a negative, but it actually should be a positive because it was a kind of a positive value. So what I'm going to do is this is the way I can fix mistakes, is do plus equals, and it's going to bring it back to where it was supposed to be. And again, I'm going to select across this, plus equals, paste in that value, enter. Right, now it's going to move forward, but I'm going to go to frame 13, and I've got to add that value to this one as well. So again, plus equals, paste, right, brought that one in. I'm going to go to the other control, go to the Translate Z, select that keyframe, select across. This one should be the negative, so negative equals, paste, and then bring it forward. So when I do this, you should see, and this one I'm going to have to fix. I might have entered the wrong value. So, but this one you're going to see it's sort of in its proper place, right? So I'm going to go back to the Translate Z, and it might just be because I didn't enter the right value. So I'm going to try it again. Whoop. Put in an equal, and then bring it forward. All right. So I just didn't get that one at the right value. So, but now it is, right? So I've got that going forward, and now you can see we're back to that position where it's in contact, right? And these controllers for the knees, these pull vector controllers, are already moving forward because they are moving linearly. Right, so if I pop from 1 to 13, you're actually going to see the character actually has moved forward and is in the same position. Now I'm going to do the same thing to frame 25, right? I'm going to come over here, select this controller, go to the Translate Z, select that last keyframe, select across these values, and this one was the plus equals paste, and there it's moved forward, right? And I don't even have to key it again because I'm moving that keyframe, right? And I'm going to select the other controller. And now Translate Z, select that keyframe, go up to here. This is the negative, so I'm going to put negative equals paste. And now it's brought that forward. And now I have the contact position. So if I pop back and forth, I'm just going to bring this out a little bit so you can see this. If I go to 13, contact position, 1, contact position, and he's moving forward, right? If I just pop back and forth. If I play it through, it's not quite working right, but we're going to fix that, right? And it's a fairly simple fix. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the body. Seems like it's a lot of back and forth, but it'll make sense when you start to get it going. And I'm going to go to each one of these positions. So I'm going to go to frame 4, right? This is my contact position. Now, it would be simple enough to just eliminate these keyframes. If I just eliminated them, then I'm going to see that the body is kind of moving forward, right? But I have introduced some of this variation into the body, right? So what I could do, I'm going to just select across these two. I'm on frame 4, and I'm just going to pull this up until the body is about where I feel like it needs to be. I'm just adjusting it for each one of the positions. And I'm going to use the period key to move to the next keyframe, right? That's the shortcut to get to that next keyframe. Now I'm going to select these, and the reason I'm selecting across all of them because I can move them all together. And I'm going to move this so that the body is where I feel like it needs to be. And then I'm going to do that again. And then select this key and that key and move it up. Right? Get it kind of to where I feel like it needs to be there. Oh, I think it needs to be actually a little more forward. And I haven't fixed the feet yet, so I'm going to get that going. And then I'll probably come back and adjust these. Now that I have the spacing on these going well, I'm just going to pull this up and press period again to get to that one key. And I can kind of get the body, because this should be about right there. Right? Period again to move forward, period again to move forward. And this is probably a little high. Right? So I'm going to get that back to right where right before that contact position, right? And then I'll probably end up adjusting this a little bit more to get it kind of working, right? So now I'm going to come back. Let me zoom in here, dolly in, and select that one controller. Go to the Translate Z. Now, if your foot is kind of moving like this one is, right? Just take this, and I'm just going to bring it up so it levels off with this one. And you're going to see when it does that, it's not going to move, right? So I have that. When that foot is on the ground, it's not moving and the body's moving over it, right? Great. Now I'm going to look, and you can see that I don't have any keyframes on that one foot when it's on the ground, but I do have some when it's off the ground, and this is causing some problems. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to each one of those, and I'm going to select again, and I'm going to just pull it down. I'm holding down Shift so I can constrain it in just value, right? And then I can kind of get this thing to go sort of where I need it to be, which is going to be about right there, right? And then I can check that and see if that's about the position that I want it to be in. If not, I can kind of move that forward. And maybe I want to go back and just adjust this one, right? So I'm just kind of getting these things to sort of line up just a little bit, right? And then I can come to this one, and then I'm going to move that forward just a little bit, right? And it should look like it's going kind of naturally here. I just have a little variation going on. And I could eliminate these and just let it do its thing, right? I could just take these keyframes out, and it's going to pretty much naturally go through those positions, right? So now I'm going to select the other controller, go to Translate Z, And I'm going to set this one just like the other one, like this is kind of moving a little bit. You can see it sliding on the ground right there as that foot is moving. So I'm going to move this up until I get it level here. And now you're going to see that that foot doesn't slide at all, right? I'm going to press the comma key this time to go back to the previous keyframe. And I'm going to select this and I'm going to pull it up, right? And get it to the point where I feel like it needs to be. Again, comma to go back to the previous one. I can kind of pull that forward, so that should be right about right there. Comma again, go to the previous keyframe, and this should be just about right. It shouldn't vary too much because that was just kind of walking in place. Right? And then I'm going to go back here and I'm going to play it through. Now it looks like my character is actually walking forward, right? There we go, walking forward. Now, if I set this back to 200, remember I set this to 200 because I'm going to have it walk for 200 frames. If I play it through now, he's just going to stop, right? Because he gets to frame 25 and I don't have him continuing. And here's the graph editor magic that you can do, right? So the very first thing you're going to have to turn on, if you notice at this key, this is frame 25. This just holds, or I'm sorry, this is frame 25 and it just holds. So let me get to one of these channels that actually repeats. And actually I'm going to click there. And you're going to see that I've got these other curves that are just flat. They're straight, meaning they're holding their value, right? That's what they're doing. The reason it's doing this is because I've turned on infinity. If I turn that off, you're going to see it still will hold because it's not doing anything. Right? But you don't see the keyframes continue or the animation curves continue. So I'm going to go to view. I'm going to turn on infinity and that's going to continue these. You're going to see the animation curves continue. So now what I want to do is for every one of these, I'm just going to select the main control. Then I'm going to go to curves and you're going to see this post infinity. And I'm going to go and turn on cycle. And what cycle is going to do is it's going to keep repeating those, right? And if you see, you know, one of them that doesn't, it's because it stops here and it jumps. So for this one, anyone that jumps, like every other one's going to repeat. It's just going to kind of flow nicely. And this in and out, this slow in and slow out, or whatever these tangent handles are picking it up from the very first frame, right? And it's translating it here. So this is like frame 1 right here. But if you see one that does this, it's because we need that one to do I'll just select that channel. You don't need to actually select the curve or the keyframes. I'm going to go to curves, post infinity, cycle with offset, because I want it to continue its movement forward on the Z. Right? So that's pretty much the only one that I'm going to do that with for that one control. So now I'm going to, dolly in here. I'm going to select these two controls. Whoop. Let me do this again. Select those two controls. And you could see that that infinity just goes straight. So they're just going to hold. They're not going to move. But I need them to move because the character keeps moving forward. I'm just going to choose that translate Z. Choose both translate Zs. And I'm going to hold down Command again. You can hold down Control if you're on a PC. And then make sure you do curves, post infinity, cycle with offset. And that's going to keep that movement forward. And if I look at this, it just keeps going forward, right? It just keeps that same trajectory. Right? Now I'm going to do the same thing with the feet. Just select the feet. And the very first thing I'm going to do is turn on post infinity cycle. So it takes everything and cycles it. And then I'm going to choose the translate Z. And on frame 25, you're going to see that it does that jump. So I'm going to go to curves, post infinity, cycle with offset. Right? And now you're going to see it jumps there and it's going to start here based on the offset of this keyframe, but it's going to repeat this kind of curve, right? So I'm going to go to the next foot, this one. Again, translate Z, you're going to see that. But when I first select it, what I do is it selects everything. When the control is selected, it selects everything. So that's why I'm going to that first, going curves, post infinity, cycle. And then I choose the translate Z because you can see that it's offset. This is the only one I need to have cycle with offset on. So curves, post infinity, cycle with offset, right? And now that continues its trajectory the way it did it. So now let's look at what's going to happen. So I'm going to dolly the camera out. I'm going to play this through, and you're going to see that it keeps going. The only problem is when I do this, you're going to see that the arms are swinging and the body's moving, but then they stop. So I need to do that for all the other controls that have animation. So what I could do is just select across everything, right? I'm going to hit F on the keyboard here. Anything that has a cycle with offset, but I'm going to actually turn off. I'm going to deselect the foot controls because I've already set those, right? I also want to deselect these pull vector controls because I've already set those, and the center of gravity control because I've already set those. With everything selected, I don't want to select any of the channels, just the controls. I'm going to go curves, post infinity, cycle. And now when I move forward, I'm going to deselect everything. I'm actually going to do this so I can show none in this view, and then just the polygons so I can see this character moving forward. Right? And there it goes. Just going to keep going until he ends. Right? Come over here. And there we go. So if he starts to drift further and further, this is kind of one of the big things. If he gets further down here, and I'm going to press F on the keyboard just to get to that frame. But if it looks like he starts to drift more and more away from his feet, it means the value is different as he's progressing forward, right? So what you're going to have to do is fix one of the controls to get that to be a more precise value. But if you're copying the values, the distance between those contact positions, the way that I did, and everything's flat and everything is, cycling the way it's supposed to be, there shouldn't be any drifting, right? That should be taken care of. So I'm going to press F on the keyboard here, select the character, bring it in, right? So if you do see any drifting, either the body is back or it's forward or something, that means that the values are not following the same way. And again, I'm going to set this back to 25 to reiterate this, that frame 1 and frame 25 must match when you're first starting off, right? It has to match. And the same with 13, those foot positions need to be sort of offset. And I can see here that I kind of messed something up in my offset here, right? So I could just go and select these two frames and then pull this back until that foot is just kind of hitting the ground, right? Because these two things need to be the same because I don't want it to move. Right? So I can see that I kind of messed that up. And then I'm going to go to frame 25 and I can look at that one and see if that's doing the same thing. I'll select that control. And then I can drag this up or down just right when the foot is hitting the ground. And I'm grabbing both because, again, this is where I don't want the foot to look like it's sliding. And if it's flat, it won't. It's going to be placed and it's not going to move. Right? So now let's look at that again. There we go. Right? And he's sliding a little bit there. So what I want to do is I'm going to go here, and that's because this center of gravity control is a little bit off, right? So you can see him sliding there a little bit, right? So I'm going to actually select this control. So if it's doing that, I'm going to actually take these and I'm going to bring this back just a little bit until this foot is planted firmly on the ground. There's a slight bend in the knee. I mean, I can do it where it's kind of straight, but I want to make sure that that foot is flat on the ground. Right? So it's probably off just slightly on my values. Right? I'm going to go to 25, and it looks like that matches up. So then I'm going to go to this foot, and I'm actually going to bring that one back a little bit. So I'm going to grab both of these, and I'm going to kind of pull that back right until that knee locks, right? So if it goes too high, you're going to see the controller moves away from the foot, but I'm going to do that right to about right there. Right? Then I'm going to go to frame 25 and I'm going to look at this here. So I probably need to bring that waist controller back there. So I'm going to pull this back just a little bit, right until that foot is flat on the ground, right? And then I need to go to this control, go to the Translate Z. This is just fixing things up a little bit because, you know, if the values aren't perfect when I copy them, this is what's going to happen. So pull that up just a little bit, and then I can go over to here, and I could probably do some adjusting there to make that, you know, a little bit nicer of a transition right there, right? Get that more of in a position, right? So now you're going to see that, you know, I see that that foot is sliding a little bit there too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that back just a little bit. It's just because I've been modifying these values, and now I can see if his foot is going to slide. There we go. So it slides a little bit right there at the beginning. And so what I can do is I can grab that tangent handle. Whoop. I need to unlock it. That's because I am on non-weighted, so I need to switch to weighted. And now I can select that keyframe. Now I'm going to break it. I'm going to select this handle and just add a little bit of slow in and slow out right there, so I can see that it doesn't slide. Before it was broken and it was doing that little kind of a little hiccup where it would kind of slide when the foot was on the ground, right? And now this foot's going down. So I'm going to do the same thing with this one. I'm going to grab that foot, select the Translate Z, make sure, look at that foot controller right there. Select that. All right, go here. Again, I can just select the whole curve, weighted tangents, select this, make sure it's broken, and then I can slide that up just a little bit. And then that should give me, there we go. Yeah, perfect. And there's a little bit of a up there. And so what's probably happening is I have a little bit of something going on in the Translate Y. It's the body right there, and that's in the Translate Y. So I need to kind of look at that and get that in the right position. And if you see this looks a little different, it means this value and this value are different. So I'm just going to copy that value. I'll do it with this one. Copy that value, select that key, paste the value in there. There, now it should be doing the same thing, right? Perfect. So a couple little issues that I need to fix up, right? But if I do that, and if you see, if these curves aren't looking right to you, can just grab this handle and you can kind of match it up a little bit, or grab this one, and you'll see that when I do that, if you grab this one, you can see it changes over here. So I want to make sure that I'm keeping this flowing, because that's what it's doing. It's just connecting between the two, right? All right, and when I walk forward, now he's doing the right thing. So, didn't mean to do that. Go back to object mode. And now let's look at the character moving forward again. Make sure that we fixed up everything. Press Q on the keyboard so I'm not on the move tool. And now I can play. And make sure it's set to 200 or further beyond 25. And now the character is going to look like it's walking across the screen. Right? If you do see him drifting a little bit, then you can go back and fix. Like I think that he is, I'm going to go to 25. I think this waist controller is moving a little bit too far forward. So I am going to pull it back just a little bit. Right? Go to the previous one. I'm going to pull that one back just a little bit. So his foot is still on the ground right there. Right? And then I can go back and look at the others. And I think that that one's a little bit too far forward, so I'm going to pull that back a little bit. Right? And I'll go back, back. Again, I think that one's a little bit too far forward, especially when you see that the foot starts pulling away from the controller. You can check that. Look at this one, select that. Just kind of get it centered, or that might be pretty good. Go back one, and that one should be good. Right? So I can go forward to each keyframe. Right? Now I should be good. So now we're going to play forward. And now I've kind of eliminated that. He's not drifting anymore. I just had to pull that because I made some adjustments to the feet. So I needed to make those adjustments to the waist as well. So that's how you can kind of tune that up and get it working right. So I hope this helps, and good luck with your own character walk cycle and translating it forward and making sure that it doesn't look like it's sticking to the ground.